The open range cattle industry is a transplant from the heath and meadow of the old country. From the Massachusetts Commons, Carolina cowpens, the Florida Pine Barrens, and the Appalachian Piedmont, the crackers trailed their cattle westward. The cattle industry flourished in Texas and spilled on to the Great Plains, wherever free grass and water abounded.
The ranges were free to all. The business was a fascinating one and profitable so long as the ranges were not overstocked. And no man could say with authority when a range was overstocked.
The problems that became associated with free and unrestricted grazing on the public lands began soon after the Civil War. The Great Plains was ready to take on large herds of cattle and sheep and other livestock. It's during these years, right after the Civil War, that the transcontinental railway companies are beginning to push out onto the Great Plains. Refrigerated cars are invented to carry meat great distances. You have the Indian barrier being removed by the Army at this time. And probably most importantly, with increased immigration and as a result of the war and changing lifestyles of people, beef is becoming more in demand.
When the first big outfits came through, they established headquarters in specific areas and then claimed large tracts of land through the country, mainly concentrating on water, and then they branched out with their cattle from there. We found that the large herds, horse herds, cow herds, whatever they brought up with them and put on the range, had taken the range from a pristine environment to where they ate the grass off and took it down real low in some cases to where they really denuded the range.
As overcrowding on the range occurred, cattlemen and others felt that to get the best use of the range, they had to use it for everything that it was worth. You had no guarantee from year to year that you would have the range that you had the year before. And so there was no incentive on the part of cattlemen or sheepmen to try to preserve or improve the range that they used. At the same time, the dry farming movement was growing in the American West. And many homesteaders were moving into areas that were once thought only valuable for grazing.
By the 1880s, crowding on the range led to fierce competition for control of water and all the grassland within reach. Barbed wire fences sprang up to enforce the early claims.
Then came the winter of 1886-87, the Great Die-Up from Canada to Kansas. It was a day of reckoning with the tally book for cattle barons and operations dependent upon the winter grass of the open range.
Along the streams and in the coulees, everywhere were strewn the carcasses of dead cattle. Those that were left alive were poor and ragged, weak. I wanted no more of it. I never wanted to own again an animal I could not feed and shelter.
A home base for winter with hay and dependable water supplies shaped the cattle industry by the turn of the century.
In Montana, at about the time of World War I, two disastrous events came together to force a change on the livestock industry in Montana. First came drought. Beginning in about 1917 and going as late as 1921, many areas of Montana experienced severe drought.
After World War I, agricultural depression hit. Beef, wheat, and other agricultural products plummeted in price. Many homesteaders and ranchers were forced out of business.
And another big problem was that there were so darn many horses, and there just wasn't feed for the cattle and that, and there wasn't water. The horses could travel quite a ways for water, but the cattle couldn't. So therefore, this thing that they called open range was something that you get for nothing is nothing, and that's what it was.
With the help of Congress, Homesteaders and small ranchers quickly filled the void left by the departing cattle barons. In 1909 came the Enlarged Homestead Act that gave 320 acres of non-irrigable land to settlers. The Homestead Act of 1912 then reduced the time necessary to prove up on a homestead from 5 to 3 years. In 1916, the Stock Raising Homestead Act gave settlers a full section of land chiefly valuable for grazing purposes. But even with these new amendments to the settlement laws, the life of the homesteader was not easy.
Dear Mr. Farr, I am writing you to let you know that I cannot pay the balance on Mrs. W.H. Reed account, as I have had no crop for the past 6 years, and I expect to pay it this year. But the drought took the crop, and the grasshoppers cleaned us of everything. I have been all alone on the ranch, but the past 6 months I am having a hard time to make a living. But when times pick up, I can, maybe, some way, I will pay it. Respectfully, Mary Murphy.
In 1917, I raised a fair crop of oat hay on 42 acres. In 1918, I don't know how much it yielded, as I was away to war in France. In 1919, no crop. It was a very dry year.